the meal had finished, and we started on this tablecloth, and he started writing, and he filled that up, and so I moved down, and this was going on for a while, man. And then I moved down again, and it must have been about 6 meters long. So I thought, to Pierre, and I couldn't read much of his writing, but I understood the diagram, so I folded it up. I said, what do I can do with this? And I stuffed it in my shirt somewhere, and I thought, this is the Beatles tapestry of the gaming movement.
Hello amateurs, welcome to episode 80 of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some legendary rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host Tim, and today I'm in Tutu, southwest London, where preparations for the Great Rugger Run have been really amping up. I've been making tons of contacts up in Scotland, reconnected with some old friends, and of course been putting in the miles as well. I've run 115 of them this week, and well, I'm kind of proud of that fact. This year I'm raising funds for the My Name's Doddy Foundation, who are supporting people with MND and funding research to find a cure. Doddy Weir is one of my, and I think most people's rugby heroes, and I'm looking forward to supporting his incredible fundraising efforts thus far. The plan is to run 500 miles in 25 days from rugby club to rugby club around Scotland. Head over to thegreatruggerrun.org to find out all the details. This is the first episode of season 3. Wow, it's been a heck of a ride so far with lots of different types of shows. How did you enjoy the Stories From series last season? I hope you liked them. I really enjoyed putting them together, and I'd love to hear your feedback at AM Rugby Podcast on Twitter or at Amateur Rugby Podcast on Instagram. But to kick off season 3, we're going to go back to my favourite way of doing things, an in-person interview. And my guest this week is the first two-timer on the Amateur Rugby Podcast. The man is rugby coaching royalty, Mr. Lynn Evans. His original episode, number 26 in season 1, was one of the most popular to date, and I was hugely excited to sit down with him and talk all things rugby once more. This interview was recorded in August of 2022, and we talked about Littlemore Rugby Club, Chinnor RFC, his book, From Valley Boy to Table Mountain, Pierre, Villepreux and Plaisir de Mouvement, Lynn's thought on the lack of flow in the modern game, and there are even mentions for the Beatles and Bishop Desmond Tutu. Hope you enjoy my conversation with the remarkable, the revolutionary and the inspirational Lynn Evans. Lynn Evans, welcome back to the Amateur Rugby Podcast. I've got to tell you, you're the first repeat guest. How does that make you feel? Oh,
it's a pleasure always to have you in my house for a start, you know. I feel very honoured.
Well, it's great to see you again. And I thought we'd start with something. After our last chat, I just had a little note at the bottom there, and it said that you've met the Beatles and Bishop Tutu. Is that right? Yes.
I was playing for Oxfordshire when I was younger, and we played at university, and after the game we went to the club they have in the middle of Oxford called Vincent's, you know, and we just finished eating upstairs, and this guy came up, he said, do you know what, the Beatles are downstairs? And I said, I wouldn't say the rude word, I said, get away. And anyway, somebody else came up and said, the Beatles are down there. That was too much, I had to go down and see. And there they were, John, Paul, Ringo. And the guy who brought them in was Jeffrey Archer, you know, the rogue politician.
Right.
But he's also a sprinter, and he was at the university doing a dip education, I think. And I got the autograph of, what was that? Which one was it? I can't remember which one it was now, but it wasn't Ringo, it was the Harrison.
George Harrison.
And I had a raffle in school because everybody knew it, the word got round, and I got about £20 for charity. And Archbishop Tutu, that was another good story. I was a centre manager at the school that I working with the community and the school. And Archbishop Tutu was in town, and he was coming to address the school and other people in the sports centre. And I was hovering around, just making sure there were no kids messing around. And he came suddenly through the door, and he ran up and came over. Lovely to meet you. Well, what's your name? Well, I said, I'm Lynn Evans, sports centre. Oh, what's nice thing? And he's chatting to me for about 5 minutes. He'd lost the official party. And I thought, God, I said, just with Archbishop Tutu talking to me all the time.
What did he say? Can you remember?
Oh, he asked me what my job was, and did I enjoy working? And he never stopped smiling, I think it's difficult to remember everything because I was so overwhelmed with this guy. But the follow-on is that one of the players I coached at the university, a guy called Fanny de Tol, really good guy. I met him again recently. He was appointed by Archbishop Tutu as the mediator between, the former government and trying to get the both groups together. And I thought, what an honour for a guy like this. And I was so lucky that I met people like this. I just couldn't be luckier, I don't think.
And, well, you mentioned your job there, but since we last talked, you're now a published author as well. So what was that process like? And tell me a bit about the book and how it's all come together.
Well, where did I start? Well, I thought I'd write a book about the methodology of this movement game. And I showed it to a former pupil of mine who was an author, a guy called Michael Tanner, who'd written books on. There's a famous greyhound, I can't remember his name now, and there's another horse that got shot, and he wrote those books. I showed him, he said, well, there's not enough about you in it. I said, well, it's not about, it's about rugby. He said, but they want to know how it came about. Oh, God, you mean I got to write a book now? So the die was cast, and so I started my research, and it took about 2 years, and I really nearly got it done. And the guy who was publishing for me became seriously ill, sadly, and he has recovered. But I had to find somebody else. So it took me a while, but the school I was coaching happened to have a publicity officer. And he said, oh, I'll do that for you. So I rushed on my copy to my friend from school, who was very good at English, so he corrected all my rubbish words. And this guy said, oh, we publish through Amazon. And so that was it. Put some photographs in, and it was really quite cathartic to go and think about what happened in your life and how you came to where you were,
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine that'd be true. Is there any, a couple of little stories from the book that you might want to share now?
Yeah, well, one or two, I should think. But I mean, I'm also honest that at the university when I was coaching, there were one or two coaches that I didn't really get on with, because you had to do this type of coaching between September and early December. Now, people who come with structure find it really difficult, and if the captains were structured by nature, and mostly they happen to be South African, I don't know, while others who embraced this sort of freedom, like some of the Australians and some of the Irish coaches, yeah, they were great, and we tended to be successful despite the fact they had to change, some of them, the way they played. But when it clicked, it was wonderful to see, So, that's one of the stories from my career. But there are other things as well. I think I told you I formed a rugby club here. Well, it's in trouble now because the game at grassroots level is struggling.
This is Littlemore.
This is Littlemore Rugby Football Club. Formed in 1976. Well, we played rugby then, and the boys were off council estates, and they were uncomfortable going to the bigger clubs. So we agreed with the community officer to have a public meeting, and so Littlemore Rugby Club came in there. But now they don't play rugby.
Oh, really? Is it?
The school. Now, what's the problem now? We don't have. So last year they struggled to get a team together, and the average age was about younger than you. Not much, but so it was difficult, So that's one of the challenges. But I think they are recovering today, and what other from Littlemore Rugby Club, they asked me to have a guest of honour at their annual dinner, and it was held in this posh hotel in the middle of Oxford called the Randolph. Well, I said, how many did come in? I wasn't organising. 160. And then not just that, they got videos from various people the guy I grew up with at Risco told me what it was like there. Guy from the rugby union who worked with me. Mark Egan, who captained Oxford and head of World Rugby. David Kirk, New Zealand captain, really quite moving what he was saying. He was part of one of the best New Zealand sides ever, but coming to Oxford allowed him more freedom to play because their rugby was really very good, but very, very structured. And Pierre Villepreux with his, he speaks like Lynn, he's a very nice man. Yeah, so that was a really, and I conducted this choir at the end because they wanted to sing, you know.
Mate, and when was that?
Oh, When the Cold Comes from the Rhondda, which is quite a jolly song.
Right.
and the sloop John B, which Chinnor Rugby Club sent about 40, they made a choir of their own almost, you know. So, and my family were there. It was a beautiful evening.
Wonderful. Actually, let's talk about Chinnor because we didn't do that in the original conversation.
Right?
So tell me about your time at Chinnor and what you achieved there.
Ah, right. When I had left Oxford because they wanted a professional coach, so somebody came from Loughborough called Steve Hill, a good, nice enough guy, but I think they thought my way was a bit too laissez-faire, you know. And anyway, I'd enjoyed my 15 years, and a friend of mine who was Welsh from Chinnor kept ringing me up, you know, there was no email then, and said, can you come and coach for us? We'll pay you. And I said, I just have my rest. Anyway, I succumbed. I said, I'll go over and see, which was fatal. So I went over and saw, and I then coached them for, and it was a challenge to start with. Most of them ended up on the ground, you see. And we gradually got better over 2 or 3 years, and a very good scrum half called John Vaughan, who was a Welsh boy, and he got them to say, look, we've got to play like this. And on 3 years, we went up 2 divisions, and then I thought, that's enough. I'm going out. And I left there, and within about 2 months, the university wanted me to coach the under-21s. And I thought, well, that's a nice group of boys. And so that's where I went there from Chinnor. And Chinnor moved on in the rugby world, and now in League One, isn't it?
One, I think, yeah.
But I wouldn't have wanted to coach now in that, so it's...
Why not?
I think the pressure is on you, you know, it's relegation, promotion, right in the middle. And there's so many coaches. I think they got 5 coaches this year. Well, not too many. The players don't get involved much, you know. They're told what to do, and they've done very well. Don't get me wrong. And I'm happy that they are where they are. But that wouldn't suit my way of coaching, because I think the players have to take. There's guys there know more about scrummaging than I ever will. So I said, you take the scrum line. I'll have a look at it. And they feel they're wanted and responsible.
Yeah, and empowered to actually make decisions and then do that on the pitch as well.
Exactly. And so I'm pleased that I coached when I did. And when I coached at Oxford, as you remember, it was in the early 80s to mid 90s. Well, we had a first-class fixture list. You know, it was your former club, Blackheath. We'd play there. It was a tough old game. 5 games in 2 weeks you'd be playing. And of course, these guys in the forwards, they weren't very used to that. but we had fantastic international players there, you know, as I mentioned, David Kirk, but others. And I've been in touch with them, and I just heard one story. This year, the end of last year was a 150th anniversary of the Oxford-Cambridge game. And the group in 91, which included 3 Irishmen, Phil de Glanville, the captain of England, and Andy Moore, the Welsh international. They invited me to be their guest. Well, I thought I'd go up in a 5-star hotel by Buckingham Palace. Don't put your hand in your pocket, anything like this. And wonderful evening. Victor Bogo was a guest speaker, I think. And they looked after me all weekend. You know, I wrote to thank her. I said, it's our thanks to you for, you know, what you did for us during a particularly challenging year where there'd been a bit of infighting. You know.
Well, that's wonderful. It obviously shows what regard you're held in there?
Well, it's the pleasure you get from, and they are first class people. That's the pleasure I got, and getting paid doesn't really worry me that much.
So tying a couple of those things together there, your book and the time at Oxford, I believe you talk about meeting Pierre Villepreux in the book, and you invited him to come and help you out at Oxford as well. I'd love to hear a bit more about your first meeting with Pierre, how that all came about, and then what made you encourage him to come and coach with you.
Yeah, well, Don Rutherford was a director of English coaching. He put Pierre's age, both fullbacks. He invited him because he felt the French methodology he'd heard about him was different. And I went to watch the session he did at Marlow Rugby Club, I think under 17s, and play was moving up and down. I thought, there's no drills here, they just playing. But there's something more, I haven't picked it up yet. So at the end, I asked Don if I could see Pierre, and I went in the changing room. I said, can I find out more, Pierre? Yeah, he said, I'd come to Toulouse, yes. And so, fortunately, I got a grant from the European Union. That's why I'm pleased that we were in the Union then. And so I had a free trip to Toulouse, and Pierre showed me everything. People like Novis was playing, Charvet, Jean-Pierre Rive. What a side they had. The first session I went to, I was on the side with him and Scrella, and the players were on the field. They were just playing this slow game of rugby. I said, Pierre, not going on yet? No, he said, they warm up. They are trying to find space and support. They never dropped the ball, hardly. And I thought, this is interesting. And so I had a week of learning there. And he took me to the restaurant where all the players were, and I taught them a rugby game of drinking, passing hi-ho, and
swapping rugby cultures.
Yeah, exactly, swapping cultures. The forwards got absolutely drunk while the backs were watching, and then they came in. And it's from there it developed. I invited him to England and to help with the coaching at Oxford, and he helped 1 year with us, or 2 years with us, and then I went to his courses and took some boys from here. Gary Pierce's, remember the prop for England?
Yeah.
His son won Player of the Week there, so we weren't that bad. And we went on this. I went on this course for the next 15 years and taking coaches over to learn, and it was a real eye-opener for me.
So just going back to the beginning of that story, what was it that really intrigued you? Because it sounds to me that you're maybe still not entirely sure what it was, but have you got any words for that?
Yes, I think it was just the continuity. There was no stopping, and he'd maybe ask a question. He could speak reasonable English while the boys had just recovered a bit. But then it was again, he used 2 balls so that when it broke down, he just quickly put the next ball in. So continuity. And I realised there was a flow to the game. And on first instincts, the boys were struggling, because after they passed, they often stood still. And he said, you must support the ball, okay? You cannot stand still. And because they used, probably the backs would sort of stand like this, the forwards. And it is that ability to get continuity that takes time. And the older you are, the more difficult it is to adapt. That's what came across to me, and the skills of the shape of the game were missing, because if they didn't support immediately, you had contact, and that was the start.
Okay, and something I saw in your book as well about one of those trips to a restaurant there in France and a paper tablecloth.
Oh, God.
What was that story?
Well, I was asking him, his writing, by the way, is illegible, so diagrams, I hope, mostly. We started, the meal had finished, and we started on this tablecloth, and he started writing, and he filled that up, and so I moved down, and this was going on for a while, and then I moved down again, and it must have been about 6 meters long. So I thought, to Pierre, and I couldn't read much of his writing, but I understood the diagram, so I folded it up. I said, what am I going to do with this? And I stuffed it in my shirt somewhere, and I thought, this is the Bayer tapestry of the gaming movement. And I wish I'd kept it, because it would have been a wonderful mural, wouldn't it? You know?
It'd be incredible, yeah.
You know, and I thought, that's the one mistake I made, you know. And, so it was quite funny, I thought.
Can you remember any of the content that was on there?
Oh, yeah, he was sorry about the positioning of players in depth. You know, it's important to have people come behind to see the space, and also he did little practices where they beat one-on-one and then moved to the lateral space where the defence came from the side. So he was adapting practices to suit the game, and he started using phrases like the penetration game. I've never used that. You know, go forward, go and help him, not pass. Look for another, un autre. And I learned that French was getting better. I've been doing French, by the way, every day for the last 2 years. I'm not fluent yet. But, and it was that capacity to choose the language, you know, that is more generic rather than specific, you know. If I said, look for another, it could be anybody who was there. But it encouraged the player to look and then move on.
Yeah, and then make their choice.
Yeah, make their choice. And in the questioning, it's not about, why did you do that? Tell me, if you were in that position again, would you have changed your action? And if you said no, okay, well, maybe, did you look this way? No. Okay, that's all right, and on we go. On y va.
You are fluent. Okay, this all sounds really interesting, but I'm also very interested in what happened when he came to Oxford, because I'm assuming there was possibly a group of players there that hadn't seen this style of coaching before at that point. So how did the players adapt to it, and were there any teething troubles and things like that?
Well, there are two groups here. The time I went in to coach the Blues, and then the time when I coached the 21s, and that was very different. So I'll start with the Blues. The challenge always is that the varsity game is within 3 months of when you start coaching. You know, you although I started in January, it didn't have all the players who are going to come for next year, so it's not a year-long thing. So the challenge always was, do I have enough of players who could understand this process within a short range of time? Some years, and when I first went there, it was difficult because first year was some good players like Stuart Barnes, Derek Wyatt, MP, oldest player, never made a tackle while he was at Oxford, but he intercepted more than tackles that he made. And anyway, the years that there were some really good players there, people like Rob Edgerton, there was David Kirk, a couple of back rowers who were internationals, Troy Coker, Rob Edgerton at full back, Ian Williams, Australia, David Evans, Wales. We could play. And I think I got a note there from Chalky White, the great coach. I kept it because it said, well done, great strategy, well implemented. I thought, to get it from him was... and then we'd have a year where some of the players really just weren't able to... Although they liked the structure, and then to change... Well, I think I told you a story last time in the changing room where Pierre had seen them running into each other quite a lot, and he said, Lynn, can we go in the changing room? No problem, Pierre. Here we go, the PhDs, and these boys sitting down. He says, listen me, boys, if I ask you to go out of this changing room, which way would you go? And this guy, Coveney, his Irish boy, his dad, I think, is foreign secretary or something. He thought, why is he asking that? So he said, Pierre, I presume we have to go through the door. Yes, he said, but why outside do you always run into the wall? And I thought that was a priceless sort of coaching point. Because they were all like this laughing.
That's so much more powerful, I'm sure, by actually physically taking them into the changing room to do it as well.
He could look at the players and he'd say, South African. I said, how do you know that? It's passing technique, he said. see the centre? He looks at the ground all the time. He looks at the grass. He's English, I said. and he'd say, Australian. Because he'd been to these countries and seen the techniques that were specific in these countries. And God, I thought, what a wonderful ability to see this sort of game.
Yeah, that's a real depth of knowledge, isn't it? So now tell me about the courses themselves, the Plaisir de Mouvement courses. How long have they been running, and what's it like to be there?
It was an education for me. I told about the first one, but I went then every year. I usually took some English coaches, British coaches with me, and that's continued except for the last couple of years. And they used to be held on the west coast, beautiful places, Île de Moutier, where I saw the Tour of France as well, and the couple of places like Nantes. But he wanted to have a specific home for it, so he went near his hometown of Pompadour in central France, and the small town of Lubersac, where the local people said, we'd like you to come here. So they hold the courses on the local football pitch, which has got water features, to keep the pitch.
Like sprinklers.
Yeah, sprinklers, yeah. And so I started going there, and I was contributing in warm-up ideas for the coaches and learning from the coaches how this game progresses, always through the game and always through. So you got the under 10s, under 12s, under 14s, under 16s, and you can see the progressions through and people who've been there already 1 year and come back, you can just see. And they've also now introduced some girls, and they play with the boys. They obviously got different rules to what we got in England, because the girls won two of the awards for Player of the Week.
Wow.
So I think, of course it's to do with movement and skills, and so that's to me, as I took more and more coaches over, and they are adapting it now, but it's still not been really accepted over here. So that's why we're looking at this course we're running.
Yeah, because we mentioned it last time I spoke to you that you were hoping to bring one to the UK, and that is obviously about to happen now.
Yes, because the last couple of years have been too difficult with the COVID problem, and we are holding it from the 21st of August to the 26th at Kingham Hill School, which is in North Oxfordshire near Chipping Norton. Lovely setting, and the Cotswolds overlooking, and they've adopted this, because I've been coaching there for 4 or 5 years now, and they've adopted this. And I'm not saying it's just me, it's the other coaches there. They're finding that the earlier they start, the more understanding there is to the game. And they've adopted rugby as their first sport. And it's something you and I have talked about, is with physicality being so dominant in today's rugby, I'm not sure many parents are that happy with all this, these claims going in against the unions for head injuries. I'm not saying that head injuries in any types of sport that has contact, but I think we can make a different approach to it, the way we coach it, more about evasion and creativity rather than bashing into one another,
Yeah, certainly in the community game.
Oh. But even in I think last Saturday's game at some people say, South Africa, that's their strength. It's the way they play. I saw under 9s playing like that. They had lifting the line-out, scrums, but when they kicked off, everybody arrived round the ball. But I think the ones who dominated were the ones. These are future ones for the internationals. And they played all the game, Which should be for joy and for pleasure that we should be playing this game. Not how many are going to go to the top level? Minute number. And if they're more skilled and more creative, I think they enjoy it more.
Yeah, I'd say that for sure. And although I was a front rower for most of my career, I enjoyed the game. I enjoyed playing. I wasn't a typical basher type player.
If you come on, of course, you could be a born again player. Obviously, it's something you could do easily.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. So tell me a bit about how the course itself actually runs. Like, how long is it? How many sessions are there a day? What's the involvement of coaches and players?
Yes, coaches and players and coaches. On the playing side, they normally on the first day, once they're in the age groups, they all have a bib, sort of reversible, so they're team against team. And they play for about half an hour, so the coaches can recognise if there are mismatches of people who should be moving up a level, even though they're younger, some who may go down one level because they're understanding. It's to help them to be at the level that they would learn most. And then the day mostly starts with obviously their meal in the morning, and Pierre will do an indoor session on the theory of the game, and he'll do one in the afternoon, and he's there until Wednesday when he has to go back for some specific event in France. So the first 4 days, he will be looking at how the game develops, what it's about, asking coaches. So all the coaches there, and that can include people who just wanted to come, they will learn so much from that. And there'll be some visual pictures, but the idea is the principles of the game and how this game can be taught. So a wonderful opportunity for a coach to learn a bit about it.
Yeah, I've just broadened their sort of mindset almost about rugby itself, because I've been through some of the RFU coaching panels, systems, and some of it I feel is a little bit closed off, for sure. So I think it would definitely be a fantastic string to add to your bow as a coach.
I think yes, there's the ability to ask questions, etc. And the players themselves, they have rest in the afternoon after lunch because they've been working, and then they'll have an hour of activities. Swimming, they've got a swimming pool there, they've got a sports hall, climbing wall, table tennis tables, cricket nets, you name it, so that they'll do other things during the time off. And they're looked after by ex-Kingham Hill students who are sports people. So, they're looked after there, and there's a staff who are looking after the welfare of the people. We have first aiders from a company coming in to look after any injuries or pulls, etc. So it's professionally well organised. Not me, but it's my team who are looking after that.
And last time we spoke about what a fantastic social place it is as well. What have you got in plan for the social experience?
Well, Stowe Rugby Club have agreed they're going to put on an evening, so they get an evening of what's it like in a rugby club, which will probably affect their fitness. But and also a parent owns a restaurant in Stowe on the Wold, and she said she'd like to get the coaches who are on the course and people who are involved down for an evening there. And as it's our first one, we're a bit treading our way at the moment, because we just don't know how it's going to go, and so I don't get much sleep at the moment. But, and as we develop, we'll hopefully, Jeremy Clarkson is up there. I think I might ask him, going to his diddly something shop, but there are things we can do. Initially, we want to just see how it goes and see what we can learn as well.
So tell me, what is Pierre's thoughts about this? Is he looking forward to bringing this to the UK?
Well, he's bringing 3 French coaches with him. One who works in Corsica, and I've been over there for a course as well. Really enjoyed it. And 2 others very experienced who've done his courses, and they're coming over on the Eurostar, and I'm getting somebody up in London to pick them up. And they're coming over before. I might give them an Indian meal or something here, just to show we're international.
I know what we do. Okay, another thought was, we spoke last time about how he took this to Tahiti, was it?
Yes.
And another country that hadn't played much rugby as well. How do you see the difference in the challenge in taking this to a country that's never played rugby compared to bringing it to somewhere like here that's played quite a lot of structured rugby?
Yeah. In a way, it's sometimes easier to take it to somewhere like Tahiti. I spoke to Pierre about it in the last course we went, and asked him how it did. And in a way, he just said, well, do you want to play rugby? And I don't know, not sure about it. And so, yes, one boy there, one day, he said, simple rules you have to there, you can't tackle on the neck. Or so he threw it in and they picked it up and the players were watching. And, anybody want? Yeah, we'll have a go at that. And so he started with games and, often using 2 balls means that when it gets stuck, and it may give rules like you can't pull them on the floor or something, just so that they feel confident. And with the second ball, if it gets stuck, he just quickly reintroduces another ball and they leave that one or somebody gives it back to him and it continues. And what he said was that they really started to progress, but when he did something structured, they suddenly turned off completely. He said, as if they didn't understand why they're doing it. Now, there are times when you do some practices, but it has to be relevant to what the game is, problems in the game are. So if you're struggling to move a player offline and support behind, you do a practice like that, and then play wide because you've gone through this. And it's practices like that he looks at to see if they can get the correlation between the two. And Madagascar was the same, except they came out of the jungle there. I mean, our village, bare feet. And he said, I didn't see it, but he said, a little text, he said, it's incredible, he said. Within an hour, they were playing what you could recognise as rugby. Now, there's got to be a bit of credence for something like that, doesn't there?
Definitely, for sure. Yeah, I did some coaching in Africa with some kids that had basically never seen the game before. And built it up very slowly, how you just described. And it's amazing how quickly you can get them playing something that looks a bit like rugby. Yeah.
Just them passing down the line. Why are we passing down the line? That's pointless. You figure the game and then they see what the reason or find a practice. I understand that. That's why I think it's so important that there's this relationship between the game and the game understanding. Why are we doing it? And all the players have similar problems, and usually the biggest problem is moving in support of the ball. They pass and they have a rest now.
Yeah, that was a good pass, wasn't it?
Are you in this game now, or are you waiting for it to come back to you? And and they often start a game like rolling a ball forward and getting 3 defenders to come around on the knee, and then so they're taking a few defenders out, so the players are having to look which side is, little things like that, and I think that's why it's good. They find the best ways of the game understanding by using certain techniques that, I mean, for the games, they'll never have, they might kick off, and that's it. There's no other formal, no conversions or anything like that.
And tell me, what are some of the things that the players have said after this? Give me some, maybe from the start of the week compared to the end of the week might be a nice contrast.
Yeah. So, well, there's a Welsh guy involved in this called Bill Evans, took his son over to last year, and I watched him. He was completely lost in there, and I went, but don't be afraid. I said, go after the ball, but he struggled a bit, and then Bill thought he didn't like it. He said, no, I liked it. He said, I'm struggling a bit. Went back this year. I think he won the player of his group, and because he's done it more than once in that, and he began to understand the concepts. And people often say they have awards at the end of and the players vote for who they think has improved the best. And with the youngest group this year, when I went, there was a little girl. She was a beautiful runner, and she was the smallest in the group. All the boys voted for her. They probably want to go out with her sometime. But she was absolutely outstanding. And I think that's what they do, by giving the players a choice to vote for. And if there was a couple of times there was a special needs boy there, it's not elite at all. It tends to attract some good players. But if it was they're not told they can't come. And often the boy's really good with them. You know, they look after them because they know it's a challenge, and that's why I think it's not an elite course. Any player can go.
Excellent. Okay. Just tying this together with something that Eddie Jones has said recently about lack of skillful players in England, and he thinks that the fact that you never see kids throwing a rugby ball around in a park, you know, when they're 6, 7, 8, 9 or even older years old, how do you think we can get kids to start doing that?
Oh, that's a challenging question. See, when I was growing up, I mean, the only thing we had was radio, really, and with the radio, very often there's the Goon Show, maybe. But now, with all this, the other things that are going on, social media, and also how much playing in the park do you see? Not generally, maybe a bit of football occasionally, whereas we would play touch rugby and football, all games. But I'd like to think that perhaps in schools we could encourage touch rugby at break times, certainly when they're younger. Why not? You know, they have 15, 20 minutes where they could play. You know, we did it when I was at school, but I think I told 20 aside. Well, you soon learn to get sidestepping and dummying. And it is a challenge. And he was talking about the public schools, weren't they? They're dominating the game. Well, I'm sure there are some, but the school that I taught at, no rugby now played. Well, how are they going to get interested in the game if there's nothing going on at grassroots level? I think it's a huge challenge, you know, that and I'm not sure the answer.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because, just people like us who love the game and have got so much from it, talking about it, isn't necessarily going to change anything. Yeah. But I guess maybe just doing something like the course that you're bringing over here, seeing a different way of playing the sport might feed through somehow.
I must tell you a story. I went to Jersey recently, and a friend of mine who was a scout at, he talked with me as a scout at Fulham. He got half the England side, he managed to scout. Gareth Bale as well. And anyway, we're on the beach and I was walking along, there's a couple of boys playing with a rugby ball, and they were trying to pass. I couldn't let it go. I said, look, where do you finish when you pass? And I said, look, which way's the ball going? That way. I said, well, why don't you follow it out and see what happens? And his pass went like he said, that's a good idea. I thought, what am I doing here? I'm coaching on a beach, the kids just having a bit of fun. I couldn't stop. Maybe I'm addicted.
Sir, are you sure that's correct? So we used to do a section on the podcast called the Rugger Law Bore section, but I think I'm gonna can it for now, because for a few reasons actually. Because when the TMO first came into the game, I thought it was a good thing, and I thought getting the right decision was the most important thing, particularly for the really big decisions. But it's gone far too far now, in my opinion, in that every single decision a referee makes is absolutely studied to the nth degree, and everybody's got an opinion on this, that and the other. And I think some of the beauty in our game was that there was a lot of grey in the refereeing decisions sometimes. And it's come to a sort of a bit of a head with the Rassie Erasmus video a couple of years ago during the Lions. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I was watching the game on Saturday, and I was just thinking how long it takes for them to start a line-out and a scrum. And I watched the Argentinian game, and the kicker took 70 to 80 seconds to kick a goal. Now, that's time out of the game. When we played, scrums got in, they got down and away. And the line-outs were straight away. They're not waiting out there. Why can't they bring in law? Say once there's a line-out, within 15 seconds you have to be ready. You know, and this, looking at TMO, I understand why they have to do it, but you have to stop and go through every one, a marginal forward pass. The number of tries that were scored against them, which probably weren't allowed, were considerable. That's the problem with technology, is that from the safety point of view, I understand if there's a high tackle, but then it's up to the lawmakers as well to look at that and say, right, only one person can tackle somebody to get more offloads and things like that. the game has to be looked at again in real detail, but we have to be careful because sometimes the game stops so often that you lose a bit of interest in it, and you say, well, I'm going to have a cup of tea now, and by the time I come back, it probably might be the third reset of the scrum. So it can be done, but the lawmakers have to really go through it with a tooth comb and say, how are we going to make this game a little bit safer, fewer stoppages, and then the players wouldn't have to sort of stand around doing, it is fast enough, when they're in play, but and I think there shouldn't be substitutes who are coming on fresh in the last quarter. Injuries, yeah, but otherwise, they play out the whole.
Yeah, I completely agree with the substitute thing, and I think all those areas where we can speed the game up a little bit, which is where the TMO has now become. Yeah. I know they've made some improvements this year with the TMO. They're doing stuff in the background now rather than bringing it up on screen all the time, which is better. But this will help with making the players have to be lighter, and as such, then the collisions will be fewer and probably less damaging.
Yeah, I think that's to make the game safer. Anything on the ground that they've got at the moment, I think rucking was, except when New Zealand did it, they'd come out the back with the ball. Nobody said it was clean years ago because there wasn't any management around the outside of the field, but I believe we could speed the game up a little bit better rather than people going onto the ball all the time, hands on it. It hasn't worked, and more injuries as well. I mean, the injury on Saturday to Clerk was just an accident. It just mistimed. That'll happen. We accept it's not non-contact. But,
yeah, for sure. And then maybe Le Plaisir, the movement coming through will stop people just running into brick walls all the time.
Yeah, on the under-21s at Oxford, the difference there, within 3 years, first year they made, against Kennedy, they must have made 20 breaks and only scored once. So I thought, we've got to do something about that. Second year, it got better, they got more. And I've got a report by a prop who wrote about the third game where they absolutely stuffed Cambridge, 30-odd. Breaks all over the field. From their own line, they'd start to pass. They had confidence enough to kick the ball. And he was saying, well, Cambridge was usually one pass and contact. Oxford was 2 to 3 passes and then trying to play through. And they scored 2 tries from within their own 22. And when you see that type of rugby, and they're willing to play it, and I often left them to it on the last training session and said, look, you take it. I'm going to have a cup of tea going off somewhere, and you can get on with it. And they said afterwards they appreciated being on their own to work it out themselves. And when people change like that, and the captain actually, he captained the first team, he was in the under-21s, and I could see he was a talent then. And he said that he gained most from his under-21 game because he could see this methodology of playing was about giving more freedom to players. And the younger they are, it's easier to change.
Yeah, the younger they start. So, with the upcoming course, is there space for players to come on board still, coaches?
Yeah. Yes, certainly. We are looking for about a dozen more to come up on the course, under 12, under 14 and under 16. And if parents want to come, we're interested in the rugby, they can become resident or become daily if they're close, and enjoy the technology that Pierre is able to divulge to them, and the players will. I think it's just a whole week of lots of things, getting to know other young players, getting to know French coaches, where there's something new, working with young students who are looking after them, doing other activities. So it's a full-on week of learning, and 2 sessions a day. And I think on the Wednesday we're hoping to get a professional from Gloucester Rugby Club to come in and talk to them about the game and asking questions. So it's the promise of a good week.
How can people get involved? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, if they go onto Instagram, I'll read this so I don't make a mistake. and it's lowercase lpm.rugby.uk, all lowercase, and they will start finding details of it there. And there's a guy called Ben Hutchins, who's from Old Askins, I believe, and he's doing the booking in system.
Okay, I know.
And
Ben.
we'd love to see you, and parents as well, or coaches of clubs. They're very welcome.
Fantastic. So, is there anything else you'd like to say? Any closing thoughts or anything?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I've been involved in this for so long is that the principles of the game never change, but they evolve. And I think I mentioned to you that when Pierre sent out some handouts in his early days, he would distinguish in forwards and backs. Now, it isn't the same. There's nothing for the forwards or backs. They're all players. And this is what the thing is about. People don't come saying, I'm a scrum half, or they're just a player. And so there's no specific positional things. It's about the game in movement that they have to understand. And it's also player-centred in that lots of questions asked the players so that we can understand what they understand through that method rather than constantly telling them what to do. And also, I think on a residential course, making new friends and also finding out what French coaches do. I don't think there's any course in England yet that has invited 4 French coaches that I know of. And they do speak English.
And of course, France are current best team in the world. So.
Well, let's look at the way, and I think we owe it to Villepreux. He started that when France reached the final, and they beat the All Blacks when John Olumo was playing. And Pierre was the coach of most of the staff. Ibanez was his captain, and Gaultier played in the team.
This was 1999, wasn't it?
Yes, and just after, and he before he came to Wasps, and I believe that they're just building on that, and they got the right people in the right places. Gaultier is quite a strong-minded, but he wants them. Whereas Ibanez is more the diplomat and a good manager, and the forwards coach as well. And of course, Edwards is a massive addition to the group. He's changed their discipline in defence. So I hope they win the World Cup, because we need, God help if South Africa do it again. I admire them for what they are, but oh dear. I wouldn't have my kid playing over there.
It'd be tough, wouldn't it?
It would.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Lynn, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to come and see you again. Thanks very much again to Lynn. As always, an absolute pleasure to be in his company and dig into his rugby brain. The course that we spoke about is happening very soon, Sunday 21st to Friday 26th of August. That's this month. So act quick to get your hands on the last few tickets via Instagram at lpm.rugby.uk. And if you don't have Instagram, I've included a direct link to book in the show notes. I've also included a link to Lynn's book, From Valley Boy to Table Mountain, down there as well. So go and give that a read. Now, if you enjoyed this podcast, you could rate and review on your podcast player, like, share or retweet. But what I'd really like is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're down your local rugby club. I'll be back with you next week when my guest will be London Cornish Director of Rugby of 20 years, Dickon Moon. Our chat covers a huge amount of ground and is not short of opinion. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. Right, my legs are about ready to fall off given all the running I've been doing in preparation for the Great Rugger Run, but today is my day off, so I'm going to recover with a few beers over the Springboks All Blacks second test. So, until next week, get out and play. This episode was also sponsored by WebPie for all your WordPress website needs. Do you need a website, or do you know someone that does? Trust the rugby family and think of my company, WebPie, that's WEBPI, for your WordPress website design, build and support services. Find out more at webpie.co, that's WEBPI.co.